Hey everyone, Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting. I'm here with Scott Billeck, the hockey writer for the Winnipeg Sun. And Scott, let's talk a little bit about the Jets and, well, the debut of Pierre-Luc Dubois. He played against Calgary on Tuesday night, and it wasn't a great start for him, but kind of to be expected, wasn't it, given that he had a long quarantine and very little practice time to get used to these new teammates?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think you could kind of. It depends. Expectations were tempered coming into it. From Paul Maurice himself. You're trying to figure out where you fit in, what the system's like. Just everything. Communication with your defenseman, communication with your goalie when you're down low playing defense. Everything was new, and on top of that, I hadn't played in 20 plus days. And the last time he did play, it was a shift of beer league hockey, essentially. So, yeah, it was. I wouldn't look at that game as Pierre-Luc Dubois. What he brings to the table. He said it himself. Other guys did too. But there were good parts of that game too. You threw a nice hit. You saw the speed on the one play where you tried to drive the net. There's obviously good there. It just didn't show as a complete package, and it'll get there. So, I think more of the story of that game, more than anything, was perhaps the inability of those lines to, they just didn't seem to jive as well as you kind of would want them to after that. And you watched it, obviously, wrote the game story. What did you see from those lines that did or did not work?
Well, it was obvious that there's going to be growing pains with those lines, and my thought on Dubois for sure was that he got better as the game went along.
Right.
Very little ice time in the first. You couldn't tell anything from that. He was on the ice for a goal against in the second, and it's going to happen sometimes. But the fact that he didn't generate a single shot attempt, I thought was a little concerning. And that whole line was really poor analytically in terms of shot differential. But they weren't alone. And you talk about those lines and the Blake Wheeler, Vesely and Paul Stastny line was just as bad, and they had a really, really rough night. Vesely and ended up being moved off the line, and Adam Lowry getting put there. Yeah. Again, I think that's just a total work in progress with those lines. I don't think Paul Maurice has any real clue who he wants to play Pierre-Luc Dubois with at this point, because he's got to see what kind of player he has, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So in a way, it's a bit like exhibition games for him right now. He even mentioned that he didn't get an exhibition season with Columbus. He's not getting one with Winnipeg. It's going to take a few games to get this going. And I'll tell you though, I theorized today that having a couple of games against the Ottawa Senators here is a good situation for the Jets to get some of this figured out.
Well, I was just thinking that too. It's right. You get this 2-game set and you get back into a bit of rhythm. Andrew Kopp talked about that after the game. They play a bunch of games in a row there. I think it was 6 and 9 or something like that. And then they get this break, and this one was a 4-day break. They hadn't played, since last week sometime? Yes, last year was Tuesday. So yeah, it would have been last Thursday night they played. And they had a couple days off, a couple practice days, but there's no rhythm really in the games. And Andrew Kopp talked about after the game, they're going to start having pretty much games every second night going forward, and hopefully that for them, and that's what the Jets have kind of thrived on a little bit. I've found early on in the season, in a truncated season where a lot of games were happening, when the Jets were playing, they were playing better. I don't know if it was just adjustments on the fly or able to flush it better, whatever it is. They've been able to do that with more regularity when they are playing, more consistently or with more regularity when they're playing that. But also Ottawa, they played Ottawa a few times already, and it's, Ottawa's, I think, 2-11 and something, not doing very well this season.
Better lately though.
Yeah, a little better, but I think this will be a time for the Jets to kind of experiment a bit more time for Pierre-Luc Dubois to kind of get into it. I think though, and you mentioned it in your story today, last night, 12 high danger chances against for the Jets, just 1-4, not very good. And there's, still issues with that defense. And for me, Nathan Beaulieu would be the first guy that would come out if and when Tucker Poolman is ready again. How do you see it? And do you maybe see a Ville Heinola coming in? I know with the Moose now starting up, I suspect that that's the direction they wanted to have him, with him now being able to have that option to play a lot of minutes. I don't really see a space for him, but what do you see? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I saw your free Heinola tweet today. You love stirring it up with the fans, no doubt. But yeah, I mean, Ville Heinola played great in his one game. I mean, and he played pretty well in his 8 games last year, and he was a star at the World Junior. He's ready to play, but there's just not really a good spot for him right now. So I agree with you that the best place for him for now is going to be to get some games in with the Manitoba Moose. But as for the defense, it's just not really been great. And they still can't find the right defense pairing for Josh Morrissey. I think maybe his best game was when Heinola was on his other side there. But he's playing with Beaulieu the other day. And I mean, we all like Nathan Beaulieu. He's a hard-nosed hockey player. He gives his all. But he's had some struggles. He had giveaways last night. He had trouble getting the puck out of his own zone. He ended up being the guy with 5 shot blocks, but that was – a factor of the fact that the puck was in the Jets zone all the time when he was on the ice, and it just didn't end up being a very good performance for him. And I don't think that's an ideal matchup anyways, with 2 lefties on that same pairing. Right. Morrissey's better on his left side, and the Jets need to get a guy there with him. So Tucker Pullman makes sense coming in there. But then, who else is, other than Beaulieu coming out, I don't know who you'd say, because Logan Stanley's played great and deserves to continue to go. Dylan DeMello's been fine next to him. He had a pretty decent game analytically last night. And then the pairing of Forbort and Pionk has just been consistently good. Not great last night, but pretty good overall. So, I think Nathan Beaulieu could be the guy that comes out. And I am interested to see if it's just Pullman that comes in, or if Heinola is not too far off. I think an awful lot of fans would like to see that kind of puck-moving guy get in there and try to make this team a little bit better at their zone breakouts.
And I agree. I mean, I think that's part of the problem. And so the argument is, put Ville Heinola with Josh Morrissey. This is where Josh Morrissey and Ville Heinola played this season when they played together, and that was their best game for both of them. Obviously, Ville, it was his only game. But for Josh, who's been struggling, and I think part of that has to do with, just who he's playing with. He hasn't been playing with a Jacob Trouba anymore. He's playing with guys that aren't potentially on his level of terms of skill. And they're not playing him with DeMello, because I think they're trying to get DeMello into the game as well. Now that pairing with Stanley isn't horrible. And I like Logan Stanley. I mean, I liked his game. And even though he was, I would say responsible, he had a couple of shots to get that second goal for Calgary to not happen. But at the same time, he also bounced back, had a couple shots on this very next shift. He's bounced back well from kind of in-game adversity, if you want to call it. And that's a good sign for a rookie who isn't, kind of shying away and, if he does make a mistake. And so I think the Jets need to, I think there's no reason to really take Logan Stanley out. Now, the argument is there that, he's not doing any more than anybody else on that defensive pairing. So I understand that. I do think Tucker Pullman comes back in. It's probably for Nathan Beaulieu. I still think Ville Heinola could play a part. I just don't know where then. And the way the rhetoric, the language, or whatever you want to call it, that's come from this team, it seems like he's destined anyways for the AHL this year. They want him to play big minutes. They want him to play that pro game. And the argument there is, while he played pro in Finland, I think the Jets view it differently here when you're playing in the AHL. And it's the developmental league for the NHL. So that's the way they look at it. But, it is what it is. I think, people argue that Ottawa is the team that the Jets beat. And outside of that, they're 500. I mean, the numbers don't really lie. But I think these Ottawa games, and I know Ottawa, you can't write them off, any team, any night, but it'll give the Jets a little bit of time. I don't want to say time. It gives them an opportunity to maybe try out a couple of different things and get some guys more into it. And it might be a good time to also reinsert Tucker Pullman to the lineup to get him back up to speed after being out with COVID and essentially having not played in now, about a month now, looking at the calendar. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. A couple of games to kind of get the Jets back on track. and go from there. So
they need it, Scott, because the tougher part of their schedule is still to come. They have only played one game against Toronto. They haven't played Montreal yet.
Yep.
With that defense, as it's currently configured, they're going to have a heck of a time with Austin Matthews and John Tavares and the strongest players on Montreal.
Yep.
And I think that they're going to have to fix that a bit. Now, it was only just before this game that Josh Morrissey was talking about how much better they were playing defensively because they were working as 5-man units and getting the job done in terms of making short passes to get the puck out of the zone. It just didn't look as good last night, but there is some fairness in saying that the 5-man units were not the same. Things had changed because you were putting a different personnel in all kinds of different places, and you now had a different center playing in the top 6. So I think maybe you got to give them a little bit of leeway there, but we shall see. It's a heck of an interesting season, isn't it? This whole Canadian division. It's an awful lot of fun. And as you said, there's going to be basically a game every second night now until May. So buckle up, folks. It's going to be a heck of a ride. For Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching Jet Setting.